There are four things, there are three things that amaze me, four that I cannot understand. The way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a snake on a rock, the way of a ship on the high sea, and the way of a man with a young woman. This week's readings are all about man and woman, and they're actually, most of them are about relationships between men and women. It's kind of hard to read these ones because often they're addressed to men or they're about women. And so the question is, like, if you're a man, how do you apply the ones that are about women? And if you're a woman, how do you apply the ones that are about men? But I think it's probably fair in the Proverbs that you can take the things and apply them to both the sexes. And the reason I think that is because the Proverbs were originally written to a young son. That's what we're told in Proverbs 1-9. He says, my son, my son, my son, learn from me. And so they're written to a young man. And so often they're masculine, but they don't necessarily have to be. What are some of the Proverbs that particularly grab your attention and why? Well, that one that I just read to you, I think grabs my attention. It grabs my attention because scientifically we can explain an eagle in the sky and a snake on a rock and the way of a ship on a high sea. But in the ancient world, there were mysteries. And so the other mystery is the way of a man with a woman. And you think about some of the baffling things that people do for romantic love, and it's a mystery. It can't be understood. If you're interested in stories about my stupidity in the early days of my relationship with Mia, I can tell you that another time. Question 2, what is the big idea across your Proverbs that you've considered? So the interesting thing about Proverbs is it's written to a young man, a man who's probably not married yet. And so it's advice to young people about what they should look for in a spouse and the things that they should be careful of and aware of when it comes to their sexuality. So there's lots of warnings about being tempted into doing stupid sexual things. And there's lots of warnings about the kind of people that won't make good spouses. So there's the one that says, like a ring in a pig of a snout, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. That's not a good thing that you should look for in a woman. A woman who shows no discretion, she might be beautiful, but what's on the inside of her? So it talks about how do we choose a spouse that is good. It says also that he who finds a wife or a husband finds what is good and receives favor from Yahweh, from God. So there's lots of stuff here about who you pick as your spouse. Avoid quarrelsome people, avoid people who show no discretion, avoid nagging people, people who are given to adultery, unfaithfulness. That's the sort of stuff that you should be avoiding. Question 3, what questions, if any, are in your mind about the meaning or message of these Proverbs? Look, to be honest, I had a lot of questions, and it was about the whole gender thing. Like, some things are directed particularly at women, but I think that that's not all. Like I said before, I think that the Proverbs are written to a man, and so it's giving advice to a young man about who to choose for a spouse. And so they're not necessarily only applied to women. If the book had been written to a young woman, the Proverbs might say something similar to, a quarrelsome husband is like a dripping tap. Or it's better to live in the house, it's better to live on the corner of a roof with a quarrelsome husband. So it's not necessarily sexist, is what I'm saying. Question 4, have you ever lived out the wisdom of the Proverbs that you considered? Have you seen others do so? Tell the story. Like I said, I feel like in the courting of my spouse, I feel like some of these things were lived out. I think sometimes my behavior was unexplainable. There's also lots of warnings in there about sexual temptation. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? That stuff is really relevant. Paul says in the New Testament you should flee from sexual immorality. Like, when somebody's tempting you towards sexual immorality, you go the opposite direction. You got to get away from it. So that stuff needs to be lived out. Yeah, men and women. Hope you enjoyed the readings. Next week we have parents and children. See you then.